Hello, I'm James Mills and you're watching CATEX-TV broadcasting live from Princeton, New Jersey. Today's date is the 21st of August 2008 and the time is currently 11:30 a.m. in New York, 4:30 p.m. in London and 12:30 in Hamilton, Bermuda. Firstly, on this day in 1959, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signs a proclamation admitting Hawaii into the Union as the 50th state. The President also issued an order for an American flag featuring 50 stars arranged in staggered rows, 5 6-star rows and 4 5-star rows. The new flag became official on the 4th of July 1960. Also on this day in 1987, the Dow fueled the fashion of the 80s by taking a ride into the record books during a 6-year span that peaked on August the 21st. On this day, the bull run topped out at then an unprecedented 2,772.4 points. And now to the main news. Spain is grieving for the 153 victims of Madrid's plane crash as experts begin to look into why the jet crashed and burned shortly after takeoff. The country's Prime Minister has visited some of the 19 survivors, while King Juan Carlos is meeting relatives of the victims. 3 days of mourning have been declared and flags are at half-mast. Spanair bosses expressed their shock and sadness at the crash, telling a news conference in Madrid that the focus of their energies would now be on helping the survivors and the relatives of those killed. According to the magazine Reinsurance, ACE, the Swiss-domiciled reinsurer, is the leader for yesterday's Madrid plane crash, and the plane was brokered by Aon's aviation team. Pirates have seized 2 more vessels off the coast of Somalia. The vessels are a Japanese tanker and an Iranian bulk carrier. The vessels were taken within an hour of each other today in the Gulf of Aden, a busy shipping lane close to the coast of lawless Somalia. The International Maritime Bureau said there has been no communication with either boat. The hijackings come just after 2 days after the Malaysian oil tanker with 39 crew was captured in the same area. The Japanese-operated tanker and the Iranian carrier were taken between 10 and 11 a.m. local time. The Japanese vessel is said to be carrying 19 crew, but the numbers aboard the Iranian ship are unknown. In 48 hours, 3 ships have been attacked and hijacked by armed pirates. It is coming at a very dangerous stage, said Mr. Cheong of IMB. We urge the United Nations and the international community to take serious action to stop this menace. Including Thursday's attacks, 6 vessels have now been seized in the zone since the 20th of July. And actually just before this broadcast we received news that a 3rd ship has been hijacked today. It's a German vessel. We have no additional information on this right now, but we'll be sure to report it tomorrow. 3 NATO soldiers have been killed in new violence in Afghanistan, days after a deadly Taliban attack on French troops in the country. The soldiers died in Ghazni province in the center of Afghanistan. Polish news agency PAP said they were members of Warsaw's contingent in the country. Elsewhere, there were unconfirmed reports that coalition troops killed 30 militants to the northeast of Kabul. UK Prime Minister Gordon Brown has meanwhile flown to Afghanistan. Mr. Brown, who made the surprise stop en route to Beijing for the closing ceremony of the Olympics, visited British troops at their main base in Helmand province. He then moved on to Kabul for talks with Afghan President Hamid Karzai. His visit comes at a time when there has been an upsurge in deadly violence around the country. Earlier this week, 10 French soldiers died and 21 were injured in a Taliban ambush, prompting President Nicolas Sarkozy of France to make a visit to the country to meet the troops. At least 55 people have been killed in twin suicide bombings outside a munitions factory in a Pakistani town of Wah, police say. The attack is the deadliest on a military site in Pakistan's history. The bombs hit the city 30 kilometers north of Islamabad as workers left. Many people were injured. A spokesman for the Pakistani Taliban said they'd carried out the attacks, which he said were in response to army violence in the country's northwest. The Philippine government has pulled out of a controversial autonomy deal with Muslim separatist rebels in the south following days of fighting. A presidential spokeswoman described the move as a painful step, but said leaders were still open to talks. The government had hoped that the autonomy deal, which would see the existing region expanded by 712 villages, would kickstart talks with the rebels. But on the 4th of August this year, the Supreme Court suspended the agreement after Christian lawmakers argued it was unconstitutional and would increase sectarian tensions. Fierce fighting then broke out after several hundred guerrillas occupied villages in North Cotabato province. Tens of thousands of people have been displaced by the fighting. Villages have been burned and shops looted. The army is now chasing two rebel commanders blamed for Monday's particularly brutal raids in which more than 30 civilians were shot or hacked to death. As Tropical Storm Faye remains relatively static over northeast Florida, a tropical storm warning remains in effect for Fort Pierce, Florida, to the border between Georgia and South Carolina. Florida Governor Charlie Crist requested a federal emergency declaration in a letter to President Bush dated August the 20th. Crist said Faye is producing historic flooding in several counties, and that a total of 22 counties have experienced sustained tropical winds for several days, with some gusts reaching hurricane speeds. At 8 a.m. today, Faye's center was about 20 miles east of Daytona Beach and barely moved in the preceding few hours, according to the National Hurricane Center. The NHC says Faye will move slowly toward the west-northwest later today and will continue in that direction over the next couple of days, possibly reaching the Florida Panhandle by Saturday. Oil prices have risen on geopolitical worries after the US signed a missile shield deal with Poland, which was reported earlier this week. The US has sealed an agreement to station parts of its missile defense shield on Polish territory, to the annoyance of key oil exporter Russia. US light crude added 66 cents to $116.22 a barrel, while in London, Brent crude was up 50 cents to $114.86 a barrel. The recent conflict between Russia and Georgia dented oil supplies, with BP saying exports of the Azeri oil by rail to Georgia had stopped after a railway line was damaged. And the latest tension between Poland and Russia seems to weigh more on the market than figures on Wednesday, showing that US stocks of oil increased by 9.4 million barrels, the largest weekly increase since March 2001. Another factor pushing up prices was speculation that oil producer cartel OPEC may reduce supply in an attempt to prevent prices from falling. Japan's trade surplus shrank by more than expected in July due to weaker US demand and an increase in oil imports. The surplus fell to 91.15 billion yen. That's approximately 830.5 million US dollars, or 444.2 million pounds sterling. It fell down to 86.6% from the same period a year earlier. China became Japan's biggest export destination, overtaking the US for the first time since World War II, on the back of demand linked to the Olympics. But there are fears that Japan, which earlier this week kept interest rates on hold, could still fall into a recession. And now we'll go to a commercial break.
Every day, the world wakes up and goes to work, pursuing the unique opportunities that lead the global economy forward. The complexity and close connectivity of today's global marketplace is a true modern miracle that can create unparalleled success. But it takes confidence, passion, innovation, and understanding.